Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Overcoming the Podcast. I am your host, Taelor, and I am joined today by Maura Eliza. She is someone who I connected with in the Instagram spaces who has been talking quite a bit about adrenal fatigue and other health things. So I asked her to come on, and she is finally coming together. I feel like it's been a while to get this thing together, and I haven't been even talking on a podcast for a while, so I can already feel myself stumbling and we're coming out of Mercury retrograde and it's going to be fine. So we're just excited to have you all here today and talking more about physical health and a little bit of like some energetic stuff. But I want to turn it over to her to share a little bit about her story and what she does, and then we'll get started.
Thank you so much. Maura Eliza, as you said, is my name, and my company is called Flex Health with Maura. And you asked me to share a little bit about how this all started for me. And as it does for many people who get into natural health, it started with having a health problem that no doctors, allopathic doctors, could help me with.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on my own. We could say what I definitely wasn't. I was having a lot of digestive issues, just to give a little context there. We knew it wasn't celiac, and I was given the option to start exploring, quote unquote. And I knew that whatever those explorations, wherever those led me to, would either be a prescription or a surgery. And intuitively, I knew I wasn't prescription deficient and I wasn't surgery deficient. And I knew that there probably was something I could do on my own and I could just start learning. So I really started learning to change my habits, to change what I was eating, to notice patterns, to see what I could do to heal my gut. And that led me down a path of having actually a lot of success and building confidence, and then getting into essential oils. And ultimately, I mean, this has been a 15-year ongoing thing. Ultimately, I started getting into the connection between the mind and our thoughts and the physical manifestation of symptoms.
Wow.
And it's been a very, very powerful and amazing journey, full of, let's just say, things I used to be afraid of. I'm not afraid of anymore.
That's amazing. Things you used to be afraid of, like, are you talking a little woo-woo? Like things that we didn't quite understand? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you could go in any space, things that I emotionally was afraid of, ways that my history and traumas had, traumatic experiences had manifested, things that putting myself out there with having a company and like being on a podcast 5 years ago would have been like, oh my gosh. But also, I am not afraid of germs. I am not afraid of being exposed to the invisible microscopic oogie boogies anymore. And it is a super badass, enjoyable place to be in. But more to our thank you. More to our conversation today. I've been through adrenal fatigue actually twice now.
Yeah.
And the first time I didn't have that connection and that understanding of the mental space and the emotional pieces and the stories I was telling myself and how that was manifesting physically. So I was trying to do the right workout and eat the right supplement and all of these things that are very left-brained. And what was at the root of it was very right-brained. So when I came to it the second time around, and ultimately, like in that time, it cost me everything. It cost me the business I had at that time. It cost my peace of mind. It cost, I just went into like overwhelmed, can't function at all. And I was there for a very long time.
Wow.
Yeah. So the second time it came around was also a very busy, like keep it together kind of mode, when I finally realized, oh, I'm in adrenal fatigue. And I realized that because I woke up one morning from a dead sleep and a panic attack. I was like, oh, that's
like,
a good
okay.
thing. Yeah, something is going on here. Looking back, I'm like, oh, there's all these other signs. But this time I was like, okay, now I know better. I know that it's not because I skipped my supplements or because those things have a place, but the actual root was I was just on a path that was taking more than it was giving.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to make some really hard decisions.
Mm.
And as soon as I made those hard decisions, things opened up,
Mm-hmm.
things got better. And the second time around, I also had more experience with something called German New Medicine, which is like a very, very systematized understanding of our symptoms.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I was able to go back in and be like, okay, what exactly are the two storylines that I'm expressing out here? Oh, okay.
Yep.
It
Yep.
actually could be both. You can have
Yep.
two things going at a time. Okay. There we
As
go.
is everything. I feel like everything health related, life related, healing at all, mind, body, spirit. It's everything, right? There's more than just one path, one way that it makes sense. Like it's complex, especially those of us with complex trauma. It gets a really good name for that reason.
Well,
It
I
just
tell I'm a fan of saying that the body is a complex system of systems, but
mm,
caring for it is very, very simple. Like there's so
yes.
many things that you can do that are just work on so many levels. And that's what I really work with clients to get them to understand and to see and to like put into place. And that's something that really worked on with the Vibrant Way, which is a course that I am launching. We go through understanding the nervous system with kind of a different twist on it, but that's where we
Mm-hmm.
start. We don't start with the here's how to get good sleep hygiene, making sure your
Yeah.
hydration and how's your nutrition and all that stuff. That all is important, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't, it's not going to be as effective if you don't have that nervous system piece in place.
Yeah, I believe it's the foundations. Like my foundations course, half of it is on the nervous system because it's the foundations for everything. So I'm
Right.
glad that we agree in that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really those things will those kind of well, I'm calling them the left brain things, the what can I do? What can I check off the list? What can I blah 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 blah? What's my routine is important, but it doesn't get you as far if you don't have that right brain thing. So what I call right brain things is do I have white space in my day where I don't have to do anything? I don't have to be
Mm,
on call. I don't have to I get to just do whatever I want to do. Do I have
yeah.
space for that in my day
Yeah.
or in my week? You know? And that was a game changer for me. That was
Yeah.
what made the huge difference between that first time that I went through it and like had to recover for years to the next time that I went through it. And it took just, I could see a difference in weeks. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a continuous ongoing thing, but it's so much more easily integrated.
There's still a point where I mean, I agree with you that like healing is continuous, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, like it is a continuous journey, right? That's why everything that I say is like healing, overcoming, like in that tense, because it is so important in that way. But I think that there are points of progress that you can notice based on certain modalities that you've used or, like working through these certain symptoms or triggers or physical health or whatever. Like I can look back in my life and I can pinpoint, oh, this changed the journey for me significantly. Or, oh, this is when I figured out my health in this way. Or, oh, this is when EMDR just hit so hard. And then all of this abandonment wounds just like completely went so much less intense and they don't take up my relationships as much, right? Like, even though
Right.
we will always have things, we can look back at those points and be like, that made a big difference in my life, in my journey. And maybe it's not the thing, maybe it's not over, but that made a big difference.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so you and I are both quite familiar with the health lingo and the science and all of that stuff. But before we dive into a little bit more, I want to know for anyone who's listening who doesn't have much of an understanding of trauma, maybe they're just learning that trauma is stored in the body, okay? Or even just stress responses in the body. Can you explain what you're talking about with adrenal fatigue or what that would mean and kind of like what would lead up to that?
Yeah. So do you mean like what is the expression of adrenal fatigue and like how would you maybe know?
Yeah. So like what even is adrenal mean for those people,
Okay.
like breaking it really down for people who don't have context?
Yeah. Okay. So the adrenals are two glands that sit atop of the kidneys. So kind of in this back area, they're like little caps on top of your kidneys. And they're really
They
cute.
do look like that, don't they?
They do look like
Sorry.
little caps. And they're responsible for putting out quite a few hormones, especially hormones that are involved in our response throughout the day. So throughout the day, we're not like same energy level throughout the day. We're going through up and down, sympathetic, parasympathetic. And by that, some people will call sympathetic fight or flight. And we have all heard the analogy of chased by a tiger.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be chased by a tiger, though. It's like, oh, I have a deadline, or oh, time to go grocery shopping. Oop, time to, be aware enough to drive. That's like a lower level of sympathetic. And then parasympathetic is like time to relax, time to take a nap. We're chilling. That's when we rest and digest. There's definitely more to it than that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the adrenals put out including cortisol that we hear about. Different parts of the adrenal are responsible for different things that come out. So that is why adrenal fatigue can look different for different people. It can depend on whether it's an adrenal cortex that is responsible for that response, or the adrenal medulla, which is the center, medulla, middle, putting out that. So you'll see a list of like people can measure the different hormones that are coming out, like their cortisol levels, through a spit test. That's like the gold standard. To get, if you want like an official analysis of this adrenal fatigue, is this something? Of course, we can be in what would be called, fatigue or tiredness for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
For me, like I said, I knew that I woke up one day just like in a panic, and I had, to my mind, slept well, but I just woke up, and obviously my body never really got down into that place. You can have digestive disturbances. You can obviously have sleep disturbances, or just like wired and tired. You just like, when you do get that rest time, you can't turn off, you can't shut down.
Yeah.
You might have a burst of energy in the evening when you maybe should be winding down. And so like kind of that cortisol is being released at a time when you maybe didn't really want it to be. So like the signaling can be off. That can have to do with a lot of different things. So, and I really find that, yes, it matters why you're feeling tired, but when you have an overpacked, over busy schedule, the answer is always like, okay, let's make room in that schedule.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's an interesting, I find it so fascinating because it is the first time that mental, like what's going on emotionally, manifests physically. So
yes,
with the familiarity with German New Medicine, I have learned to read symptoms of people in a completely different way than some people are familiar with. But when we get to adrenal fatigue, people are like, oh yeah, okay, I can see how
it makes sense, right?
It makes sense for them. And then sometimes we start walking to like, well, also a pancreas has this,
And you can just keep getting the layers and the layers. I think when I first heard of adrenal fatigue, my massage therapist at the time was actually talking about it. She's like, yeah, I have this adrenal fatigue. And I was like, what's this? And she's like, I've been really run down. I've had a hard time like losing weight or sleeping, and my digestion's off. And she's like, yeah, I had like a lot of trauma and stress in my childhood that's like adding to this now. And I was just so curious. And then I remember, like, from my understanding, because we've talked about survival mode on here on this podcast, and I talk about it a lot on my page, is that when you're in this like stress response, your body turns on the things like massively that it thinks it's going to need to survive, right? So it pumps all of these hormones that are these stress hormones from the adrenals, right? That is all of these things that you're going to have to be able, like the fight or flight, that the stuff that is going to need to mobilize you in case you need to be safe, right? While the rest of the stuff, like the digestion, the reproduction, all of that stuff is slowing down, there are certain hormones that are just like, woo, open fire, right? And so that happens in our bodies, whether or not there's a threat. And so when you're in a chronic stress response, over time, your body is just exhausted and
Yeah.
overworked, and these things that are, you know, supposed to be helpful and in small doses they are, become a
Yes.
problem. And
Right.
so I think that's where a lot of people don't understand that there is so much that can be physically manifested from that, that
Mhm.
growing up in a household where you didn't feel safe, or you didn't even have understanding of how to manage your stress responses, or you had emotionally immature parents who couldn't manage their own emotions, and you certainly didn't learn how to manage your own. And so that stuff kind of shows up later in life in your physical health. And that's kind of where I was at, is that I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. And similar to you, it was around like 2021, somewhere in there. I'd recently gotten out of my family home. I was in college. I started having horrible headaches, like to
Mhm.
the point where I would pass out from the pain at the end of the night sometimes.
Wow.
So bad. I started seeing like green flashes of light. And so it was like an optic type migraine, but it wasn't quite a migraine. They did all kinds of tests medically, had no idea what was going on. And it turned out to be some kind of food intolerances, which digestion issues and stuff, I'm sure, from toxic stress.
Right.
But then also later realized that I developed an autoimmune disease with Hashimoto's and thyroid. So, and that does not run in my family. Like, that is very clearly from the stress that I have dealt with in my life.
Right.
And so I have dealt with fatigue for a very long time. So
Right.
I'm excited to dive
And
into this.
And absolutely, like the thyroid can create our energy levels. It also has, it plays a role in our metabolism, as does the adrenals. They definitely work together. And when we think, and if I'm thinking in terms of German New Medicine, so
Mm-hmm.
just to give you a little background on this, this was created by a man named Dr. Hammer in the 70s. And he was an allopathic doctor. So that's Western medicine for people. I make a distinction between that and traditional medicine. There's nothing traditional about Western medicine. It was created in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to go into, you know, you can follow me to hear my real thoughts on that. But
The soapbox is out there.
soapbox is there. So what was really amazing is that this is at a time when the brain scans were really, really new. And he
Mm-hmm.
noticed these anomalies on people's brains. They had been brushed off as problems with the machine, but he actually proved, no, these are actually things that are happening in people's brains. The brain was actually creating lesions on different parts and different layers of the brain according to the symptoms that these people were having started. Wow. And then he was able to map out sudden unexpected shock. We could call it a trauma with a lowercase t. It doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
you know, like what you experience. It can be like, you know, you're happily eating your peanut butter sandwich. Your mom comes in and yells at you, you know, like
Yeah.
that can create a
Mm-hmm.
trap for peanut butter or the gluten or the whatever.
Yep.
But when that conflict that you have been in, so that puts you in a high, that's that sympathetic fight or flight.
Yep.
When that is resolved and you go into a place where the adaptations that your body had to make during that conflict stage, which is either adding or taking away cells, when it's resolved, the body has to go back and either take away or add cells, do the opposite of what it was doing. So then we see fevers come. Then we see bacteria come in to kind of help take away those cells. So when I say I'm not afraid of bacteria anymore, like bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring on firefighters that are coming in to like bring homeostasis and bring my body back to where it belongs.
Yeah.
And part of that is it will dissolve that lesion in your brain as well, which will bring about headaches. And so it's very interesting when you said, I just left, and then I had all of these things where you resolved and got yourself out of this situation.
Wow.
In addition, the thyroid is directly related to morsel conflicts, being able to catch or expel a morsel. So a morsel can be a job promotion or a house that you were putting in a bid on. It can also be someone's affection. It can be trying to catch a compliment or trying to catch somebody's approval. Or not being able to get rid of something fast enough. So we could get deeper into like which side was the dysfunction on, and like how did you guys feel that? Did you have goiter? You know, like, but I find it endlessly
so
fascinating.
That specific of you weren't heard, or, you know, like anything like that can manifest physically in certain areas based on that type of wound or emotional wound.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
So with the adrenals, I was mentioning that there's a difference between the cortex, which is the outer layer, and the
Yeah.
medulla, which is the middle layer.
Yeah.
They're putting out different hormones, but they also have different conflicts.
Mm.
So one has a conflict of just unrelenting overwhelm and stress. Just like you got too much to do, not enough hours to do it, which happens to a lot of us, like especially,
That was me
right?
for a long time. For a long
It's
time, that was me.
and it's
Mhm.
very interesting that like that's where people who have been in the trauma space put themselves into because they're
Mhm.
trying to get that validation. They're still trying to like, so they kind of get into that pattern.
Yeah.
The cortex has to do with being on the wrong path. Like your body is signaling like, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't want to go down. So it's slowing you down. It's taking away your energy so that you don't pursue this wrong area.
My mind is blown right now. This is so cool. I mean, I'm just connected. I'm like, this just makes so much sense. Like, also, I'm a spiritual person too. So I'm just thinking of like how much physical health evidence there is behind, like, I can think of stories where it's like, I wanted to go after this relationship or this person or to this school or whatever. And I just kept hitting block after block after block. And I got sick and I was tired and whatever. And I was just frustrated because I was doing everything right and this should be
Right.
happening. And then it ended up being really good for me in the end. And it was good that this thing didn't work out, or it was good that I was sick because I missed out on this or whatever it was.
Right.
Here I'm thinking like it's the magical universe all just making sure I'm on the right path, but like your body's involved too.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And it all goes together. And so instead of going like really, really deep into that, I like to think about it in the terms of polarity. Like some people call it masculine, feminine polarity or yin and yang, or to me, masculine, feminine is so easy to think about it because then I
Yeah.
have like an archetype and like
Mm-hmm.
personification and like all of
Yeah.
these things that it just resonates for
Mm-hmm.
me. Helping people, like when I look at my own story, both times I was putting myself in a position where I had to be scheduled. I had to be on it. I had to be in
Yep.
charge. I had to be, all of these things. And it came from needing to control,
Yeah. Yep.
whereas this time I'm really learning to release that control. And oh my gosh, so many things are so much better because I give myself that space now, because I nurture this part of
Mm-hmm.
myself. And I literally sit down and think about like, what do I want? And it doesn't have to be anything that this is an exercise it's not my exercise. It was taken from a book called The Surrendered Wife.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, it was from The Empowered Wife. Same author. Anyway, so it doesn't matter if that want is achievable. Like if I want to go live in Paris, like it
Yep.
doesn't matter if that's actually going to happen, because the value is in saying, what do I want? And like tapping into that piece of myself, which is that feminine. It can change tomorrow. I don't have to have the same things on the list. It could be something as simple as painting my nails, or like I said,
Mm.
moving across the country. And it doesn't matter if it's happening because I'm just nurturing that part of myself. And
Yeah.
I find that there's lots of times when I'll just put something on the list. I'll be like, oh, well, hell yeah, I can do that. I want some new tops for the summer. I can easily go to the mall today.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just made my own want come true.
Yep. I love that you bring up the masculine and feminine energy. And I've talked about this before, and some people have wanted other terms for it. Like we came up with like sun and moon.
Sure.
However, and we're not saying that like only a man is in masculine energy or a woman is in feminine energy or anything having to do with gender or sex or anything like that. It's just what we know of energies and roles and that we can describe. But when it comes to healing, one of the things that, because like I've talked a lot about my journey and how far I've come, and I feel like I've like gotten free and let my inner child out, and I'm super creative now and just letting myself be weird and judged and goofy and whatever. But the things that I still struggle with, which makes a lot of sense because of how I grew up, is that control thing, right? I've done so much better in the last probably like 6 months at releasing control and not needing to have everything. But I used to be so rigid on this needs to happen this way, then this, but it was always about my life. Everyone else, I was like, go with the flow, whatever, you're accepted, you're
Mhm.
loved, everything will work out for you. Me, it's like,
Right.
you have to do this, you have to be successful in this way, and then this is going to launch this, and then this step, and then this step. And if anything fails, you're a failure and you're done. And you're like,
Yeah.
whoa. Oh, right. And so that's kind of how I had been facing like this entrepreneurial journey. And I got 3 people sign up for my first course and was like, "Oh, but I'm doing it right. I'm just right."
Right.
And and then what happened is in the middle of the course, I fell out of that energy.
Mm.
I was just like in like almost like a freeze mode. So it was hard to keep up with that. But what I found is like that survival, that prove yourself, that control, that is more of like the masculine energy. And that's, I think, what I was in more recently at when I first got out of this environment and that kind of thing. But I think for me, again, I got into it because I went no contact with my family and I felt like I needed to
Mhm.
prove something again. Right. So
Mhm.
like there's
Right.
things that come up and it's like, I'm capable, I am strong, watch me, da da da. Right.
Right.
And
Right.
that's true, but I don't need to over control and prove that stuff, right? Whereas now
Right.
I'm just like everything flows, it's like everything happens in the time it's supposed to. Like even you and I was like, I have to reschedule. You're like, hi, I have to reschedule. And I'm like, oh my gosh, right?
Right.
But
We're
if
both
we both
having
were like,
right.
you have to learn surrender, right? And I love how you can say just like,
Right.
so in the meantime, what can you do? Because this is something that we've wanted to talk about for a while. So then in the meantime, what can you do to work on things? You were working more on your course. I was working more on my physical health and managing my ADHD. And then it came together the way it needed to, right?
Right.
And I think because neither of us were in that like hyper controlling mode, it came together beautifully.
Right. And to layer on kind of a little bit back to what you were saying,
Yeah.
we all have masculine and feminine parts to us. I couldn't run a business if I didn't have a healthy masculine part to myself. But
Yeah.
I think we tend to be, on this spectrum, we tend to lean one way or the other. And that can
Mhm.
happen no matter what our gender is. So my
Yes.
actual core is very, very feminine.
Mm.
And for a long time, I didn't respect that. And until I think that was the big key this last round with adrenal fatigue was that it came at a time when I was also starting to think about respecting my feminine core. And that being able to nurture that, and like I was saying, making time for the I wants and the flowiness of myself and the white space where I just can even give myself permission to just be bored. I'm not really bored. I just don't have anything to do, and like
Yeah.
rename some of those things has
Hmm.
allowed me to take and to have that masculine part of me that is structured and remembers to take her supplements pretty regularly and remembers to drink the water, or says, no, we don't have time for that today because I already have these other things going on and we need space for this other stuff.
Yeah.
And whenever we get into the controlling, I think of that as like an imbalance. So, and it can be our imbalance masculine, it can be imbalance feminine. And that's why I really like having it personified in that way. Because
Yeah.
when I start to talk to people about it, I'm like, okay, think about, if you want to talk about the imbalanced feminine, let's talk about the imbalanced girlfriend that we all have seen or been, where she gets mad and she gets out of the car and she's walking home 10 miles, or she, just
Yep.
like a puddle of tears about, this or that. She hasn't learned to be her queenly self. She's maybe trying to grasp it, trying
Hmm.
to claim it.
Hmm.
But the really mature feminine part is like, I don't need to say it because it's just self-evident, you
Yeah.
know? And
I
then
don't
the
need to prove anything to you. I don't,
exactly
you don't deserve my reaction or yeah, like all,
right. It's like, oh yeah,
I
you
can
just
sit back and I'm magnetize and accept and receive and communicate without being
right.
controlling. Yeah.
Right.
I
And
understand.
the controlling masculine again is that imbalance kind of immature where we can, the boyfriend that is super controlling, the boyfriend who's like
Hmm.
can't even handle you talking to somebody else, that kind of those kinds of things. Whereas um a mature or grounded masculine is a great leader and is
Hmm.
a great container for all of those wild emotions. I've heard the analogy of a vase. Without the vase, the flowers just plop all over the table.
Mm.
Right? And so does the water. But when you have the container, that masculine container of the vase, that's something that can hold the water and the flowers so that the flowers and the water can be really beautiful and in full expression of themselves.
I love that idea. I love that
I think
idea.
it's so beautiful.
I was thinking a little bit, I'm like, what balance, what I feel like it, I'm even thinking astrology because this is who I am as a person. But like
they all go together.
I feel like I'm pretty balanced. So I'm gonna get woo-woo for a minute. So I recognize that like I definitely take the lead in relationships, especially romantic relationships. I have
Yeah.
an Aries rising and an Aries Venus. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the girl who goes up to you at the bar and say, "Hey, you're cute. Like, talk to me." And then if you reject me, whatever. Like now I do, right? But
Yeah.
like, I'm a little bit less upfront, but I'll be the one to make the first move, which is a lot unheard of this day and age, right? But it's interesting to me because I realize that like that sets the tone for everything else, right? Because like I like to be nurtured. I like, I am like very romantic, and I do want a man who is like does things and is structured and can hold space for all my creativity and my goofiness. But I lead with my masculine because I'm in control of picking you. I'm in control of deciding you're safe or I like you. And if not, I can leave, right?
Which is not true.
Seriously, hi trauma. How are you? I don't think I have ever been broken up with because of the men that I have picked were more feminine. And when conflict came, they were avoidant, and I was the one who wanted to confront. And I like people who would even push me to the point of, I'm just doing this so you'll be the one to break up with me. I don't think I've ever been broken up with.
So I just am gonna go ahead and recommend the Surrendered Single to you.
Okay.
Because as a person, I'm totally resonating with what you're saying because I grew up, and I actually don't think it's unheard of for women to be taking that assertive, dominant, quote unquote, masculine role because of the feminist movement. I grew up in a very feminist household. And, when you start talking about that, people who want to think mean about you are like, oh, she doesn't like women going to school. It's like, no, that's none of that. It's just that feminism, like some of those constructs don't do well in a relationship. If it did, we'd be all over it. We would be so happy, and divorce rate wouldn't be going as high as it is. Yeah. But in my experience, being in that role, in that pursuer role, in that controlling, like, okay, now it's time for this, now it's time for this, now it's time for this. I walked away. I'm divorced, by the way. I walked away from that relationship with some serious questions of like, how much did he love me? How much did he want me? How much did he, not really feeling that. And not that he didn't, because you really can't make somebody like stay with you for 20 years and like get married and all that stuff if he doesn't want to. But I was so sure that I knew the right timeline that I never give him space to have that, like, that really romantic gesture, that really like, leading those things. And like you said, he got used to, or maybe never was going to be a lead.
Yeah.
So I ended up with a partner who either learned or, however that was, whenever I started to be like, oh, wait, I need somebody to lead me. He was like, what?
He's like, that's not the dynamic of, oh yeah.
Right. And so had I held back, things would have been different. So in some way, things would have been different.
Oh yeah.
And like I said, I mean, now that I'm in the dating scape again, that book is really, and these concepts have really made me approach things very differently. And honestly, it's easier. It is so much easier because I'm in alignment with my core. I'm in alignment with, my core essence. I am just having fun. I'm not like trying to, and then you attract the person who's either the man who can like make the reservations and do that stuff, or they don't. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's done.
And just, it's so interesting.
There's a vulnerability in that receiving. And I think it really does tie into the adrenal fatigue, because you are in, to use that language, you are kind of in that masculine mode. So the last time that I had adrenal fatigue. I was homeschooling my kids. I was running a business. I was, working on my Instagram really, really hard. I had my kids 5 days a week. I only had a couple evenings off. It was like, all of these things. There's always something.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, a flag that I now recognize, and I'm just going to share this because I feel like there's somebody out there
Yeah.
who's going to hear this, is when people hear what you have going on, they're like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
When you're hearing that, you're like, oh, wait a minute.
Oh, wait. You know, what's interesting because I remember exactly who I admired to be when I was like, probably like a late teenager, 17, 18. I'm like, as an adult, I want to be seen as this superwoman to everyone, and no one has any idea how I do it all, but I do it all flawlessly. That's what I wanted in my life.
Yeah. You're going to drive yourself up a wall.
I would be achievement and have all of these things, and like my relationship would be, everything would be so successful. Like literally, that's what I wanted, to
Yeah.
be the one who could do it all. And
Right.
it's so funny because now I have very much shifted into my feminine energy and receptive energy. I think really since connecting with my inner child's allowed me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even, I'm not pursuing relationships anymore. I'm very much like magnetizing, and like people have come to me and I'm like, this resonates or this doesn't, you know what I mean? But like, I'm not forcing anything. There was a situation where I had like an intuitive nudge to like make myself known. But then completely back off. And I've backed off. And if it's not a thing, it's not a thing. And then if it is, cool. But like, I'm not, I was a little bit too masculine at first and wasn't listening to my intuition. And I'm pretty sure that freaked the person out. And it happens, right? But it's just interesting. It's like, I think as that I have been healing, I have been able to connect with more of like my core, like, and then it's like I have the Aries that presents itself first, but then I'm like a Pisces sun and a Pisces Mercury and a Cancer Mars, and like I'm just all more of the like feminine, watery, ooey gooey.
Wait a minute. Did you say you have an Aries moon or an Aries what?
Aries Venus and Aries
Oh,
rising.
okay. Okay. Because I have an Aries moon and a
Okay.
Pisces sun. And I was just about to be like, that Aries, it can be like in your face, but so helpful.
I mean, oh yeah.
Like
Like people tell me all the
complimenting a
time, they're
Pisces.
like, you're intimidating, but I'm also really impressed by you. And I'm like, thanks, Aries. Thank you. But honestly, that's why I am as strong of an entrepreneur and assertive and all these things that I are as the Aries. But then I'm just this little ooey gooey little thing in the middle. And it's like I have this ooey gooey center that I want to protect, right? But for years I didn't let people see the ooey gooey center. And then I would get mad that it wouldn't treat me like I was like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh, I
friends,
mean,
anyone. And I'm just like, why?
the intimacy of that, because we don't really get this construct. We don't really, I feel like balanced masculine and balanced feminine are
Mhm.
not shown. We see a lot of examples in our movies, in our media, in our politicians, and our celebrities, and pretty much everybody of the imbalanced version of those things. So
So much.
I really had to exercise, like, what does she look like? Like, I made this mental space, like, and now I have like this kind of this feminine, I imagine her in this, not in this hand or representing this hand, like, and she just sometimes needs some attention. And then my
Hmm.
masculine comes up and I literally hold each other's hands. And I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
I had to like really create these kind of personas in my head,
Yeah.
because it is so helpful to just take that moment and be like, what do you want? And just, is it a time to say what you want? And it doesn't matter if it's going to come to fruition, because saying
Beautiful.
it and letting that come up
Hmm.
is huge. And then the masculine comes around and doesn't try to necessarily solve the problem. It's just like, yes, I'm here. I've got you.
Hmm.
Or this time where you're falling apart, or this time where you're like just finally admitting something that's bubbling up, or this
Yeah.
time, so it's just, yeah, it's just amazing, fun work.
It's interesting that you say that about the feminine of just what do you want? And then just kind of like releasing that control and letting it go, right? I've actually found in my life, especially recently, the more like I can set the intention, but when I am not attached to it, when I'm not controlled on how and when and why, then it shows up beautifully. Like
Mhm.
absolutely beautifully. Example, I set the intention that I needed to get back into making my courses. Like I said, the first time around, it did not go well. I was trying to prove myself. I didn't even realize it. Like there were things that like it just wasn't going right. And I also had the undiagnosed ADHD that was the little things was hard to manage and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I just have been getting this intuitive nudge of go back to your courses, go back to your courses. That's the whole reason this platform exists. Like, this is what you want to do for people. I'm like, okay, right. And I'm like, get over the failure, go back to your courses. I'm like, okay. And so I'm like, okay, well, if I do that, I'm going to need help. I'm going to need help for someone who can help me with the executive functioning things that are hard for me sometimes, that I can make myself do it, but I burn myself out forcing myself to do these things with the ADHD that's harder. And then I don't have time for the creation as much. And, you know, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And I remember setting that intention. It was on like a new moon, actually. I was like, okay, we're going to do this. Within 3 hours of that new moon going direct, like it was like that night. And then I woke up to an email in the morning saying, hi, I am someone who is a virtual assistant for courses. I realized that you have this. I can do this, 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 this. And I was like, I kid you not. And I was just like, okay, I'll do it and whatever. And I just like surrendered. And I'm like, it'll happen when it's supposed to happen. Went to bed. In my inbox when I woke up within like 3 hours of the new moon going direct, I was like,
That's amazing.
okay. And so like the thing is like when you know something is right, the mechanism will show up.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
There's this self-development course that I took. I was talking about like, you know, intent and mechanism, that you setting the intention is what's important. If it's meant to happen, it's going to happen and the mechanism will reveal itself. The
Yeah.
action and how is not up to you.
Yeah.
That's what the universe, like you take the steps, you listen to your intuition, but if you're in control of it, has to be this way. I can't like think of how many times, like let's think of like, this is really easy for people, relationships when you were younger. You were convinced that person had to be your person. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. They were so cute or whatever it was, right? Do you really think you would have been happy now as an adult with that person?
No.
Look
No.
now and I'm like, well, I dodged some bullets. Thank you, universe, right? But at the time, there was nothing else I wanted more,
Yeah.
right? And so I think sometimes we just have to trust the process and know that sometimes that like our subconscious and the world around us, like we know it's best for ourselves. And if things don't work out, then they're not supposed to. And the things that do, you don't have to over control. You're not going to lose what's meant for you. And I
Right.
think that's been one of the really helpful things for me.
I always tell myself my prayers are always being answered because big picture, that's what I see in my life, that my prayers have always been answered
Yeah.
and that it doesn't always, yeah, like you said, and it's not always answered the way I want it to be answered or the way I expect it to be answered. But
Yeah.
when you look back a couple of years later, you're like, oh, actually, yeah, this did work out just well. So now, with a little bit more maturity under my belt, I've learned to kind of roll with things
Yeah.
there. And it is, yeah, like we were saying, the surrender is absolutely a huge piece to that. Just,
Yeah. And I believe sometimes things don't happen. It's kind of going back to what we talked about in the beginning. When we are not physically ready, or like our bodies are not ready, or there isn't enough level of healing or regulation or whatever it is, the environment isn't right around us, that it's just not coming together right now because all of the pieces aren't together. Right.
right.
And I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about when I came to you and I was like, I am trying to do this and I am exhausted and I don't know what's happening, but I can't access anything right now. And just we can kind of talk about that process and what you can do for someone in that mode, because sometimes our bodies are just like overloaded, not working. I don't know what to tell you. And it happens for a lot of us who are have been in chronic stress or have just been healing. So
Yeah.
let's talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
So, yeah, something that we haven't really talked about is that one of my specialties, well, my primary way of working with people is through frequency.
So cool.
And so that, in person, I have devices where I can use frequency to move the lymphatic system, put the body in parasympathetic and, those kinds of things.
So cool.
I also have a device called a bioresonance feedback device, and that can be done remotely. So it uses quantum entanglement to literally take a photo of you. And that photo is like an address or a phone number. I'm dialing it up to get to you. And then we can do a scan, because it's not just a woo-woo concept that we're all light beings. We literally are. Like we literally
we're literally energy and frequencies, and yes.
Exactly. Yes. Sound frequencies, light frequencies. I have a blog post called, I think it's For Scientists You've Never Heard of, but That Will Change Your Life. And they were doing research with light, research with showing that when you use a laser and pass it through some information into another medium, so that could be like a test tube with salt water, you pass it through some DNA, a sealed test tube, you will have DNA develop in that test tube.
Wow.
Yeah. Another man named Gary Iev was working with rats, and they gave them this medication where it totally destroyed the pancreas. So all the rats get this medication. They know what it happens, well documented, right? So one group, the control group, they let them just die. They measured how long it takes. The experimental group, they got them to this really, really critical point where their blood sugar was a do or die situation. Like they were headed for certain death because of their blood sugar. And they took a hologram of a healthy rat pancreas and then used a laser to shine into the abdomen of the rats. Quickly, their blood sugar started stabilizing. Days. Then they were normal.
Whoa.
So they kill these rats because they don't figure out what's going on, right? When they cut them open, they actually found pancreases. The rats had regenerated healthy pancreases through light communicating into their bodies.
Wow.
So I'm not like making any kind of
no, I don't think so either. Anything,
but I was just I'm just making that caveat leading into his research, as well as Royal Rife. I don't know if you're familiar with the Rife devices, or almost everybody's heard of Nikola Tesla. Many of these people who worked in frequency medicine, their research went into this particular device that I have. So we're using quantum entanglement to connect with you, and it scans the light in your body from a distance to figure out like what's going on. So what we can do with this is, as I was talking about German New Medicine earlier, you can be in a place where your body is kind of breaking down. It's kind of in stress. It's kind of, and that can be from a toxin. That can be from a food allergy, like you were saying. It can be from nutrient deficiencies. It can be from emotions, but parts of your body may go into major stress mode where the molecular spin isn't going right. Maybe reversed, or it's slowed down, or it's whatever. And we can read that, and then we can actually offer up the frequencies to help the body get back onto that path so that its own healing abilities are going on. So for you were like, what is wrong? We were able to go in and be like, there actually isn't anything wrong.
Yeah. You're in so annoying.
It's annoying, but again, we'll go back to German New Medicine. When you're in that healing mode, that's a lot of times when you're, in certain conflicts, that's when your symptoms express. That's when we have like miles of mucus coming out of our face. I had the same thing in February when we were talking, and I just had to go dark for like 3 weeks because I was forced in bed, no voice, all of these things. And I scared myself. I'm like, okay, I'm definitely in healing. I knew it's annoying. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But in German New Medicine, that's how they're like, that's when those intrinsic firefighters that you have come to the fire and hose it down. That's your bacteria. That's your fungus. We hear about staph infections. It's like, oh my gosh, but we always have staph in our bodies. It lives in our nose. And to say that the staph is the cause of the infection doesn't make sense if it's always in our nose.
Interesting.
But if you think about it, it's like blaming the firefighter for the fire, because you always find firefighters at a fire. Staph comes to help break down the deteriorating tissue, clear it out, clean it out. And depending on how big this conflict is that you're resolving will determine the level of healing symptoms that you will have. You've heard of a healing crisis, I'm sure, like in your
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever heard of that? Like when you start working on these traumas and these things,
Yep.
you do go into a physical healing crisis. So
It
with
gets
Dr.
worse before it gets better.
And
Yeah.
it gets worse before it gets better. And Dr.
Mm-hmm.
Hammer has an explanation for that as well. Like it's just also beautifully mapped out. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he went deep. There's literally an index of every diagnosis or symptom you could imagine, A to Z. You can just
Wow.
click on it, like on their website. Anyway, so that's the device actually, and we can use it to help a person offer up those different frequencies that can work with people on an emotional level or just from the physical level. I had a client come to me recently, and he's one of his biggest complaints is that he's over 100 pounds overweight, and it doesn't quite make sense with how much he walks. And he's like, I'm sure I eat more and I eat 100 pounds more than I should be eating daily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we were able to go in and, as a practitioner, you get down to the why, like, well, what could be going on here? Is there stress in the thyroid? Is there stress in the adrenals? Is it the pancreas? Is it the liver? Is it like
Mm-hmm.
there's so many reasons that you could have that.
For
Kidneys.
sure.
I knew he wasn't holding water because anyway, so so we were able to do the scan and his pancreas came up. And so now I know, like, okay, you don't, yes, we want your bowels to be moving, we want all these things to be working well, but we need to pursue a protocol that's supportive for the pancreas.
Wow.
So just as a demonstration, I kind of worked on his pancreas just there while he was there and just showing him like, here's what would be happening, blah, 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 and just walked him through the steps because he doesn't have to come in to see me anymore. But it's sometimes really helpful for people to be like, so what are you doing again?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I don't see him for another couple of weeks. I hear not much from him. He makes another appointment with me and says, oh, I want you to do that bioresonance thing again on my these areas in my pancreas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, come to find out in those 2 weeks, he's like, something happened with my cravings. Like my wife came and offered me candy and I didn't even eat it. And she was like, what are you, who is this? He's like, I'm more aware of like what foods make me feel like crap and I'm not eating them. So wow. I was like, oh, that's amazing. If it gives you a little boost and a little like step, yes, we will bring in the emotional piece too. Yes, we will bring in like some of those left brain protocols to, get at leptin resistance that he probably has, all of these things. And I'll be working with him to connect with practitioners to help him get more answers if he needs them. But it's all of it. It's not just one thing. Like you were saying earlier, one thing doesn't fix one thing. It's a combination of things. So I always start in very similar places with people because we got to lay a foundation of safety for that nervous system. Your body needs to know it's going to be fed and watered and rested. And then we can add more specific things if we need to. But sometimes just as simple as making sure we're getting enough water each day, making sure that we have some minerals coming in, making sure that we have the bowels moving. That can be a game changer for people, as well as time to understand your emotions, time to relax from them, time, maybe a couple of, if you're not quite there to like really go deep, what are a couple tools that you can have? Some essential oils, some flower essences, some the great thing about natural medicine is like there's so many options. Like, what do you love? Let's use what you love. And then that brings in another aspect of how many people do we hear saying, I hate taking my medication? And like the whole energetic of taking something you hate and putting it in your body every day.
Yeah.
You don't have to be.
Yeah.
So like,
it's amazing.
It is. It is.
There's just so much to it. And I think that I'm on the spectrum of balance of all things. I used to be very anti-medicine. And for me, I have found such success on ADHD medication.
Mhm.
But I also take the supplements and I also, do other things that support that. So I'm on a very low dose of ADHD medication, but I still needed a little bit of a stimulant to basically turn on my brain, help me get that task
Mhm.
initiation piece, right? And so I think that it's really cool to where you start understanding your body. And I think in the healing journey, just in general, the more tools that you get in understanding your own body, the more you know what is right for you. And you can go into these approaches of, okay, like, with your client, like pancreas was important. And then what else? So maybe you also need to go to a nutritionist because of this. Maybe you also need to, whatever.
Mhm.
And so then I think like when you have more pieces of the picture, then you're like, oh, and then that's when things start changing, right? It's,
Right.
with any kind of healing journey, physical, mental, emotional, anything, I found that it's been a lot more than one or two things. It has been a combination of all the things. People ask me all the time, what have you done? And I'm like, what? What did I do? Like, what was the thing? Like, if I had to be like, this is it, there isn't a this is it. It's
No.
the changing the environment. It's cutting off the toxic people. It's connecting with the inner child. It's EMDR therapy and attachment wounds. It's setting boundaries. It's, talking to friends differently. It's deeply understanding myself. Like there are so many things within it that it was also like managing my physical health and my thyroid and figuring out what works there, finding a fitness plan that works for me so I feel comfortable in my own skin and my own body and I feel strong and whatever,
Right.
right? That
Right.
there's so many pieces to it. And so I think the more knowledge and the more perspectives and lenses that we can put on something, the better. Because
Right.
healing is mind, body, soul. It really
Right.
is.
And I think something that I want to underline that I just want to make sure is really important for people to understand is that you mentioned the first step was connecting with your own body and your own self, because
Yeah.
especially when we have that trauma at a young age and when we are in an environment where our survival depended on somebody who maybe was inconsistent or not very nice, or like you said, emotionally immature adult, you have to shut down some of those things
You
to
do.
be able to be able to survive just in that environment. You can't leave, you can't get out. And
Yes.
then, we see that like next level kind of empathy start to come out where you're picking up on all of these cues because
Mm-hmm.
you have to.
Yeah.
And to be able to release and relax that and be like, okay, it's my survival does not depend on being perfect on picking up those cues, perfect on performing for a person, perfect on,
Mm-hmm.
you know, even for myself, I like if I take my supplements most of the days, I'm good. I'm super happy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and knowing myself and knowing that actually a little bit of variety sometimes actually works really well for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not easy for me to stay with a routine of taking a pill all the time. So that's why part of the reason why medications are not a great option for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and being gracious with myself within that. Like there was a time when I would have been in like, oh, stupid. I can't remember to take a stupid little pill every day. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
none of that is true.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not like that. It's not like that. And that's actually, I mean, I do recognize that there are people who literally, if they eat the thing, they pay for it later. And my goal, the reason why I named my company Flex Health with Maura is because I believe everybody can heal to a point where you can have the flexibility. You can have the glass of wine from here and
Mm-hmm.
there. You can have the gluten, and our goal is to try to get you in that place, because there was a time
Yep.
where the gluten meant that I was going to have a bathroom episode
Mm-hmm.
shortly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like that anymore. And part of that was resolving and the healing the gut, but also addressing the wound that caused that in the first place, the trauma that caused it in the first place. And I did that with my German new medicine person.
Yeah. And that brings up an interesting tangent. And if you don't feel comfortable or don't want to go into this, it's totally fine. My thoughts were we've talked, there's like new research on gut health connection
Mhm.
and the brain and function.
Mhm.
And I know there's been some research in regard to like stress as well, correct?
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, can you share a little bit about that and how just some education, like brief, maybe just like baseline understanding of that so people have an understanding?
sure. Absolutely. So one thing I want to say is that you have to be a savvy consumer of research.
Mm-hmm.
For one, we have a lot of wonderful whistleblowers who are coming out and talking about how research today is not the same as research it was in the past. Today, a lot of research is very strongly influenced by industry, and research can be buried
Mm-hmm.
depending on who's paying for it. And
Yeah.
so it may come as a shock because I hear this in both the natural world and the allopathic world. Serotonin is produced in the gut and is often described as being like a mood thing. But through Freedom of Information reports, we have actually learned that that was one of the cases where industry was influencing what got published about that. So anything that did not support the idea that serotonin influences mood was buried. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So now Kelly Brogan is a person that is very near and dear to my heart, and she has a blog post about this. She's not the only one. I actually found a after school. Do you know that like YouTube channel? It's after SKOOL. And they just do so many amazing, like short little videos on various topics, and they'll illustrate as they're going along. So they might take a podcast or a TED talk that somebody did, and then they'll illustrate going along.
That's cool.
If you want me to send you the one on serotonin, I would be happy to send that to you.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but dialing back to Kelly Brogan, she was the first person that she was a psychiatrist, and she dove into the actual research and was finding that these meds that she was prescribing actually weren't more effective than placebo. And she started going in a different direction. Yeah. So she was mentored by a man who was doing a lot with diet. And she got so successful with that she threw her prescription pad away. She talks about this on the Joe Rogan show. She was talking about this a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, and to make a point that I think was really important, she's like, I wasn't dealing with the middle class sad mom who was just kind of like, I mean, not that that's not valid, but she's like, I was actually working with people where if I didn't help them, they were going to be institutionalized. Mm-hmm. So these were extreme cases where she was having success with diet, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I think that whenever it's been my personal experience that our symptoms are gifts. Our symptoms are telling us something. So in my lymphatic work, we're moving the lymphatic system. We're putting really great frequencies into the body. I'm doing this because I have a machine and it's a wand that like drags across the skin. Yep. I show it on my Instagram a little bit, but I'm literally just doing that for people. And even just my experience with lymphatic self-massage that I have learned, it can change your mood drastically. Yeah. So the lymphatic system is working with the bringing nutrients to our cells and taking waste away from our cells. And other protocols that I've done that were, it's a coffee enema is my favorite. Like, I know that's kind of like, what some people get like, but what it does is it works on the phase of detoxification that actually takes toxins that have been identified by the liver and like put out and like grabs and says, we're going to actually take this all the way out of your body, rather than letting it recirculate through your blood and into your tissues and things like that. Like, have you ever had the experience where you did a detox protocol and you felt like you had the flu, you're like achy and like maybe started to have a skin rash or anything like that? It's called a Herxheimer's response.
I haven't personally, but I don't do huge detoxes, to be honest.
Okay, good. Keep with that. So that is when the liver has released those toxins, and that second phase is not there to pull them out. And so now it's recirculating in your bloodstream and maybe resettling into tissues and things like that, which is no good. We don't like that. So the coffee enema increases your glutathione, which pulls those things out. This is the long way of saying that I have had times when I had nothing but like just anxiety that day, and I was just like, ugh! And I've done a coffee enema and it's taking care of it. Now there is no reason why it should be. Wow. I am laying on my uncomfortable bathroom floor. I am like, with the things that you have to do for an enema. There's nothing comfortable or fun or pleasant about that. Okay.
The visual picture. the visual picture right now.
I'm gonna,
oh Lord.
but you know that it's not like the actual, like there's something chemically happening that's helping me feel better.
Yeah, for sure.
But you were asking about the gut. The gut is another piece of that. Like it's one of the ways that we absorb our nutrients. We're giving our body what it needs and we're expelling what it doesn't need. We're also, you know, if you're talking about using probiotics, prebiotics, digestive enzymes, these are breaking down the things that didn't get broken down before the small intestines, you know, to get them out of your body. It's releasing the toxins. It's bringing on those good bacteria that may be in short supply from past antibiotic use, you know, it could, and it's bringing that safety to your body. It's bringing, like, this is a communication system. It's not, I'm having anxiety. This is just in this one mental health field. This is actually about, like you were saying, everything. It's the physical piece with it as well. So giving your body what it's needing is like, it's not my term. Somebody called it sending safety signals. We're sending safety signals to the body that we're getting the nutrients in that we need, the rest, the water, and getting the things out that we don't need, the toxins, toxic emotions, you know, we're giving we're giving our body the space that it needs to heal to do that. So I don't know if that was exactly what you were looking for, but
no, I mean, it makes sense that there's definitely that connection there. I think it made me think about when you told me you were like, you're in a purging phase, right? Like there's nothing physically wrong. I remember I was like, really? Like, you know, you're actually really healthy. And I was like, oh, well, that's good.
Your skin looked great. Like I was
doing a lot of work.
This is one of the best skins I've ever seen. And I love to be able to offer that to people, because think about this, like if what we're saying about sudden unexpected shocks, you know, big T or little T traumas, can send us into a conflict process and then a healing process. What do you think a diagnosis is going to do? Get the big C word, like whether that is true. And then we have put these people on a pedestal that, like, oh, they must be right. They must have it right. Even, you know, even though the evidence is, you know, not good for it. But and so it creates a whole nother thing. So being able to deliver like great news, like your body, I know it's uncomfortable, but your body is doing exactly what it needs. Stick with it. Maybe support it a little bit, do a detox bath or something to get those extras out that you can't, you know, like.
You were like, let the emotions flow and allow yourself to rest. It's doing what it's naturally doing. And I was like, but I've been resting forever. You're like, you're good. Like,
right. And tying back to like that adrenal fatigue and that excessive busyness, that is the hardest freaking thing to do. Like, I can remember so many times that I'm like, I'm too busy to be sick. I'm too busy to be in bed. I'm too busy to like all these things. And I'm not. I just am telling myself I am. There's nothing more. There actually is nothing more important than for me to take that time. Nothing.
I have found that if you do not listen to your body will force you to listen. There have been many times where I've been immobilized and I'm like, no, I can't get sick. I can't, whatever. I was just like, no, I'm like fighting against my body physically slowing me down. And then I remember it was like one time that I like broke a bone. I was like, really? Like literally got to like the level I was like, you have to slow down. And it's funny now because I'm not that way anymore, but there's someone in my life who is. And I'm like, if you knew me years ago, you think that I'm like really chill and lax now. And I don't, you know, I'm not near as like on top of things and go anymore. And like, this person is like, I will not stop. These are conditions. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm just going to keep going. I feel emotions. What are emotions? I'm going to have a panic attack and then I'm going to keep going on with my day. And I'm like, listen to your body, slow down. Breathing telling you to slow. And then it's like, it's funny because these big things happen. It's like, boom, forced rest, boom, forced rest. And then why is this happening? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was you are me, who I was 3 years ago. Please slow down, please. You will just be so much happier and, you know, and very adored because the one who keeps it all together and the one who's doing everything for everyone. But I'm like, who's taking care of you? Who, like, come on. Like, I'm like, it's like, I feel like Edna mode to Elastigirl, get yourself together. Like,
here's another thing I want to just offer up is something called Herring's Law of Cure. And he was a doctor. I don't really actually know that much about him, but his thing that he offered and put out there was that your symptoms will come, healing happens from the top down and from the inside out in reverse order of whatever you last suppressed.
Yes. That makes a lot of sense.
Top down means like just being able to believe and understand and mentally give yourself the space, give yourself permission to just lay down. You have to get that up here before you actually start to do it in your actual body.
Yep.
From the inside out, we can just think of like, if you've ever had like a cut, that heals literally from the inside out. The scab on the top is the last thing to come out, but we can then start to look at like, oh, inside out, like our guts, our intestines. Sometimes that intestinal purge is what we have, because that's the innermost part that our body needs to do before it can heal eczema or whatever it is that's like on the top level. So it's going to start with that deepest stuff first, and then in reverse order of whatever you've suppressed. So there is a downside to every antibiotic or every time that you've suppressed the mucus, or sometimes there's a reason to do that. And you're like, I'll just deal with the healing later. But I remind people, when they start working with me and we start working on these gut detoxification and the water, and they catch a cold, I'm like, nope, that's a detox. And they're like, oh, why is it so bad? I'm like, because you're detoxifying everything that you have suppressed. Like the last thing that you suppress, that's probably going to be the first symptom that comes out. It's not that you recaught anything or that anything is back. It's that your body's like, oh, right, we have permission now to purge. Yep. We have been given. And so I encourage people to really just, stick with it. Here are some things that you can do to help your body get that out some more, but like really, really stick with it. If you can avoid suppressing as much as possible, then do so. Like, because our bodies have been around for at least 200,000 years. Allopathic medicine has been around for 100. Who do you think is confused? Not the 100,000-year-old design. Yep. It's our understanding of it. And I just remind myself that very often, because there's lots of things that I don't know. And I'm like, okay, my body is doing this. I don't know why. I don't know how, but I'm going to roll with it. And I'm going to do what I can to like keep it
because your body knows. I think there's so much that we don't understand about the body, right? That energetically, we talked about how trauma is stored before. Like, I just think there's so much more about our bodies and our physical health and things that like the brain body connection, all of this stuff. I feel like there's so much more that we don't understand. Like, tell me how that makes sense, that sitting down and meditating can actually change brain structures that were impacted by trauma. Like, rebuild pieces that have died from trauma, from regular meditation. Like that, there has to be so much more that our brains and our bodies are capable of if it can actually repair to that level.
Right. And we have to hold on loosely to everything that we know about our bodies, and know, because at a time we thought that we couldn't regenerate neurons. And guess what? We can.
We are. Hi, neuroplasticity. How are we today?
Yeah. Exactly. And so, when people tell me, oh, this is, even natural people, or even in German new medicine, this is incurable. I'm like, maybe. I'll believe you. We just haven't stumbled on that yet. And so I have people who come in and like, a client was telling me his knee was bone on bone and we don't regrow cartilage. And I'm like, maybe, but all that's telling us is the person who said that doesn't know how to do it yet. Hasn't found a way to do it yet. And there's maybe reasons why they haven't, but I've been in like alternative health long enough to have seen enough miracles happen. And it really just was a misinformation and misunderstanding of how the body actually works. We're still really figuring that out. So even your top level best in the world is going to have a limit on what they know and understand and what they've learned. And, we're learning all kinds of things about how important our exposure to sunlight is and how detrimental LED lights are and blue lights are. And I was listening to a man who's very much into like, chuck everything that I learned in med school. What am I actually seeing? Like going to the actual, love people when people do that. And he was saying, oh, and one of the areas where industry has very impacted us is the idea that fat causes cholesterol, causes heart disease. Neither of those steps is true. And he was saying it's sugar. That's part of it. But if we go to Germany, that's something different. So he was saying that cholesterol actually is an indicator of blue light toxicity. I'm like, oh,
wow.
And now, yeah, right. So like, and he just, okay. So, and it's amazing because some of these things you can try out. I was saying earlier, you need to be a careful consumer of research, because research done in a test tube doesn't mean it's the same in a body. Research done in California doesn't mean it's the same as on Missouri soil, like where I am, or across the world. And that has to do with like geolines that are like in the ground making electromagnetic stress different, and like all of these things. So when you start, and then research done by researchers who don't actually work as clinicians, that's going to add a whole nother element to it.
Yeah.
So I really love the research and the things that people are telling me that I can literally go out and do that. I can go out and I can try that. So 2 weeks of, cold showers and getting out in the sunlight first thing in the morning. What does that do to me? Like, then I know what is making sure I get 2 to 3 liters of water a day. What does that do to me? And there probably was a time when I was, really hooked on placebo effect and like, not believing my own self, like, oh, it could be placebo. Well, no, not never, but like,
it's
anything
working.
above, placebo effect still has an effect. Anything above 30% is not placebo anymore, because placebo is usually about 30%. And so when I started to learn that and just be like, oh yeah, it's working. So I had to develop that inner trust within myself. And that was the first level of healing that really like, oh, okay, we got this. That's been the thing I still go back to regular.
It's the awareness and then listening. It's I think it's even the same with emotions, that it's, well, how do I deal with this emotion? How do I, how do I get through anger? How do I, whatever? It's like, okay, well, have you listened to your anger? Have you asked your anger what it needs? Have you noticed where it's showing up in your body? Have you noticed what actions are coming out? Have you noticed what it's associating with anger? Maybe it's certain type of people. Maybe it's, whatever. Like, what have you noticed about anger? Because it's trying to communicate to you. So what is that? Right. And then, okay, so now ask it what it needs. Sit with that body sensation. What does that body sensation need?
Right.
Oh, well, it wants to be heard. It wants to break something. It wants to, okay. So you were wronged. You deserve to be angry. Your anger is your protector. How are you going to get that out? You didn't deserve that. It's stuck. So feel through it. But when we suppress and go, no, that's a bad emotion, we don't do that, then it's just going to control your life. But you feel through it.
You just perfectly and much better described the exercise that I was talking about with my hands, the back and forth, what is it? What are you feeling? The anger. Okay. When she's that feminine part is like, I'm so angry. I just want to rage. And then that masculine that you were just like doing that back and forth, like, okay, what is it saying? Why? I got you. Go for it. Like I can hold you through this space. And once you get good at it, it's like superpower.
It really is. And I seriously, people ask me like, what do you do? And I'm like, I am just very aware and I listen to my body. I would say that's 80% of it. I know what my body needs. And like, since it's so interesting too, because like my anxiety, I don't even have anxiety diagnosis anymore. I used to. Nice. Nothing really changed except for healing. Like, and I always knew that my anxiety wasn't a genetic thing. I knew my anxiety was caused from all of the stuff that I went through. Right. But when I started therapy before EMDR, I was diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety disorder. I don't fit the diagnosis criteria for any of those anymore. The only diagnosis I have
Yay.
is ADHD, which I've pretty much had I look back, I've had it my entire life. It's probably a lifelong thing, to be completely honest, and genetic. Looking back, like I can see how that one is. However, it's like
Brainstem thing too.
yes,
I
absolutely.
was I haven't been trained in this, but there's a Dr. Gonzalez, he's a chiropractor who is using red light therapy on the brainstem and the different nerves, the cranial nerves.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would do muscle testing and like he was so familiar with those 10 nerves and like,
Mm-hmm.
but I remember him specifically saying, here's the nerve that is impacted when there's an ADHD diagnosis. And here's also things that happen at the same time. Shine a red light on it. And like, yeah, this guy,
I gotta get that.
right?
I gotta be so much different without struggling with task initiation. It's fine.
But it's funny, we were just talking about red light and being blue light toxic, and that's literally like just this little handheld red light that he has on there. Oh gosh, I love a good health hack.
So interesting. Yeah, and there's like these like different light things that are for your face now or something. I don't know what they do.
Yeah,
but yeah, there's like the whatever. I haven't looked all into that, but like I think that there's just so much that can add to things, right? That like it really is listening to your body first, but then it's like, then what tool? What toolbox? And I think people like you and we give toolboxes. We don't fix the thing. You can't do it for someone. You say, okay, I can tell you all of this that I know. I can even look at you and like, especially with your scans, like I can look and I can see energetically what this is for you. How are you going to work through this now? I can give you some tools. How is your body telling you to do this?
Yeah. And there's so much power. And I mean, the offering the frequencies can do a lot, but I always invite people to do some stuff for themselves, because how amazing is that to feel like, oh, I did this. I know how to take care of my body a lot better now. Like we know how to take care of ourselves in our home. I think that my kids know and understand what to do. My younger son one day was having like a day, and he's like, you need to do a coffee enema and drink some clay and then go down and take a nap. And I was like, you have been paying attention. I am so proud of you.
They're always watching. But
like, he's like, use some essential oils, maybe some frankincense. It was just like so great that they have this, just a foundation that he's learning that like, yeah, I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to douse myself in sanitizer. I don't have, and why I wouldn't want to. And like, just, it's very, very powerful and exciting place to be.
That's so cool. So talking about people watching and learning the tools, tell me a little bit about your social media and what you have going on for projects right now.
Yeah, so my social media is Flex Health with Maura, and it's flex.health.with.maura. Maura is spelled Maura. Pretty much if you put in Maura, I come up. There's not that many of us. Maura again, and I'm sure there'll be, links and such.
Yeah.
Currently, a project that I'm working on is called The Vibrant Way, and it is a 6-month course for mentally exhausted women who want to overcome overwhelm so that they can wake up refreshed 5 mornings a week.
Wow.
When I was working with people, that's what they kept saying, man, if I could just get this sleep going. And, so what we do is we walk through the nervous system in just a new different way. We actually talk quite a bit about the masculine and feminine polarity and breaking that down so that people really understand that talking about the feminine goes beyond lipstick and nail polish and things like that. Certainly a part of it if you like it, but it doesn't have to be, and kind of getting into like, how am I feminine? How am I masculine? Like, how can I work with these things to help myself? So we do kind of those mindset things. We find the stolen moments within your day, because I'm working with people who, like maybe they are like I was, the homeschool and the running the business and trying to keep up with the relationship and a social life. They don't have time to take an hour-long bath every day, or, so we're finding the pieces and the times and helping walk them through that. And then we do kind of like body hacks that are, again, low on time, set it and forget it. Like kind of this works within your thing that you already have going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's in beta launch right now, and it's super cool. Like the way we're releasing it is you never have more than an hour of content in a week,
Mm-hmm.
and then interspersed in that are integration weeks. So even if you kind of fall behind, you can catch up. All the content is released within the first 3 months, but then you have another 3 months of access to rewatch or to, like I said, catch up or whatever. So very
Nice.
excited.
That is
Yeah.
exciting. Congratulations on that. That is hard to do. I've learned my energy levels. I'm like, I'm not going to be the step by step, week by week one. It's all out there. Go at your own pace.
Right. Well, I was
Yeah.
trying to. What I've noticed is some people, when you give them it all, they'll just be like, "I'm going to watch it all in one night and get like 5% of
Yeah.
it."
Yeah.
So I like kind of pacing and dripping people a little bit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
here's a little manageable piece to get
Mm-hmm.
through, and you know that there's another one coming soon. So like,
Yeah.
hopefully. So, and then there is an accountability option where people can get a consultation with me as well to just help them actually integrate some of that stuff. So once they get a certain point in the
Mm-hmm.
course, then we can have that one-on-one time.
Love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you.
you so much for coming on here. I learned a lot today.
It's
What?
3:33 here.
Love that.
It's not for you, but it is for
That's
me.
okay. I'll take it. 3:33 is a good omen. I've actually been seeing that a lot lately. It was 1, 2, 3, 4 at one point when I looked up and I was like, yeah, it's go time. All right. That's fine. I think it was when we were talking about courses. It said 1, 2, 3, 4. And I was like,
Nice.
dang it. Dang it.
Just
So
a little
I'll be there with you. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and opening our minds that it doesn't have to be this one way of doing things, right? Like when it
Yeah.
comes to like physical health, it's just so important to really recognize things as holistic and
Yeah.
just, ourselves in general. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing all of that. And if anyone has any questions or wants to connect, make sure that you follow her. I will have everything linked, and we will be working on a live at some point as well. So stay tuned on Instagram for all of that. And yeah, I just want to say thanks again for coming. It was absolutely lovely having you. Goodness.
Well, thanks again for having me on. Instagram, like I said, is my main platform. I have a website, flexhealthwithmaura.com, and no dots in between that. But that's where the class will be hosted. And if you don't see it, then just send me a message and I'll get you updated. So again, thank you. I was so excited when you reached out, and because I've really enjoyed everything from your feed for a long time. And I was just good-naturedly commenting.
It's people are funny because they're like, I didn't think you noticed you. I'm like, I notice frequent flyers.
Right.
But here's the thing. I will say to anyone who's listening, I'm not on social media to scroll. I go on, I post, I get off. And I do that because of my own work-life balance. Because I became so consumed, and we talk about like priorities and like, especially the ADHD. And like, for me, if I am here to help people, social media is a tool to whatever. So I don't always see people and like things, unless they comment a lot, and then I'll be like, who are you? And then I'll click on it. And then oh my gosh, we have so much in common. And then I'll follow. And even then I'm not scrolling a lot, so I miss things, but I'm like,
sure.
I'll randomly have nudges like, we need to connect. We need to do something. And people are like, me? And I'm like, well,
Love it.
So from what I'm saying is like, if you're playing it cool by just watching and thinking that something's going to happen, is not just engage with the things that you like and you resonate with, and you never know what'll happen, So
right. Yeah.
more people who operate like me, who are like, I'm not paying attention until you're a frequent flyer. And then I'm like, what? It's not that I don't care. It's just
right.
I don't see it all the time because I'm doing a bunch of other stuff. So
there's only so much time, and really, social media can be such a double-edged sword. And especially if we're talking about adrenal fatigue, like a big part of that is put the ding dang phone down. Like, you don't need to be on call. You are not a doctor. You don't need to be on call on social media or on text or on anything.
And I used to think that I was like 24/7. They need me every second of every day. And I'm like, girl, they're not paid services on social media. What are you doing? You're giving yourself a full-time job because you want to help people and exhausting yourself. So yeah, that's been my boundary with myself, is like,
and on top of that, that surrender and creating space, sometimes people will figure out their stuff much better for themselves.
Yeah.
then
And it's interesting. The times that I have stepped away from social media or that I've needed more of a break are when coaching inquiries come in. Like when I'm not always on. I'm like, when I'm actually resting and like feeling good and whatever, people are like, how do you? And I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's when my new clients show up, when I'm just like usually not online. It's hilarious to me. So
Right.
it's counterintuitive, but it's the feminine thing again, right? It's
Yes.
like rest. The message that I've been getting is like rest and receive, rest and receive,
Mhm.
rest and receive. Because my whole life has been do, make it happen, make it happen. And
Yep.
you know, I made it happen, but my next stage
Yeah.
of life is rest and receive. So I
I hear that. Absolutely. I
love it.
totally.
Anyways,
Well,
nice little tangent at the end, but yes, thank you.
same, same. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. And thanks everyone for listening. Bye.